Welcome to the Limitless Human Podcast. We are your hosts, Natalie
and Cassandra. The mission of this podcast is to help you honor your human experience on our journey to achieving your limitless potential.
We post episodes every other Tuesday, and we would love if you would rate and review our podcast, as well as follow us on Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube at the Limitless Human Podcast. So, at the time of this recording, I have been back home for about a week now from a spiritual retreat I went on in Egypt. And that is probably it is the most profound experience that I have ever had in my entire life. And I want to share it with you all, share it with you, Cassandra. And I will preface this by saying that I'm in a very deep integrative process. And I'm going through some grieving for a couple of things. One, I'm not the same person that I was. The woman who got on a plane at 5:30 in the morning and flew all the way across the country, basically by herself, into a foreign country. I'm not that person anymore. And so there's some grief there. And it's a natural process as we are transforming. It's very common for us to, as we're shedding and evolving and elevating into a higher version of ourselves, is that the version that once was, there may be parts of us that's like, oh, okay, great. I'm learning, I'm evolving, I'm growing. But there's also a level of grief there. And then also too, I'm grieving not being in Egypt anymore. It's been really hard being back here. And we'll talk about that as we go. But I wanted to preface that because I'm finding it hard to articulate. I'm finding it hard to really speak about what happened and all of the profound energy that we moved, the profound experiences, the spiritual, the synchronicities, the things that you just can't make things. It's like, no, what? That happened? Holy moly. And even comprehending some things has been a little bit challenging. And but I do want to tell a story. And because I have a feeling that, number one, part of my story is something that I think a lot of people experience in different ways. And also, two, the things that I'm becoming more aware of in terms of who I am and who I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to do on this planet, I want to start making known. So, anything right off the bat you have any questions about before I kind of dive right in?
No, I want to speak to this because I've been counting down the days to hear these stories. I was like, as soon as Natalie would put something up, I would watch the stories as she was sharing it on social media about the journey. I understand I haven't been to Egypt as of yet, but I can understand when you come back from such a life-changing experience, how it feels. Before we recorded, I asked Natalie, how are you feeling being back and integrating? Because when I went to Namibia, Africa, almost a decade ago, I can't believe it. When I came back, I was so excited to share about my experience, yet having this understanding that people aren't going to understand what I went through because they weren't there. And you don't want to gloat because it's a lot of experiences that people would want. And, it's a very interesting experience to go through. And then when you come back, you're wishing that you were there. A part of your soul almost stays in this place. And, often we get drawn to places because we've had past lives there or, a sense of home experience. So I understand the complexities of coming back from an experience like that. And, having people might not understand and not be eagerly waiting to hear the stories as you return. They might on a surface level, but on a deep soul level, it's a little bit different. So whenever my friends go to a huge experience and travel and have these things, I prioritize putting some time aside to see the pictures, to hear the stories. And there's something so healing sharing it with someone and sharing it with people that want to hear it and want to hold space. And I think when it comes to you, it's so all these lessons are a part of activating your power and your purpose and your mission. So when we were talking about what we want the episode to be like and for the rest of the season, I'm like, Natalie, let's create the space. If it's meant to be a 2-parter Egypt special, like, let's do it. I don't want to say what's happened to me since the last recording is irrelevant. It's not that it's that. I just want to give you the space because I feel like this is going to be very healing for you in itself. So I'm excited. I've been counting down the days. I've been like, yes, this is like, I can't wait to hear about it, because this is a celebration. Like, this is a huge celebration. This is not something to be just glanced over. Like, I'm so excited. So
Yeah.
I want to hear like the story, like start to finish, what the experience was like, because I know you also like did the first class experience and you really invested in going in all in this experience. So
Yeah.
when you were sharing all like the bathroom, like, little things, I'm like, I love this. I am vicariously living through Natalie right now. Like all the little details, like,
Yeah.
so whatever
Yeah.
you want to share, I'm open to hearing. And I know the listeners will love it too. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I will say that it's definitely been, I mean, in going, right, in making the decision, and this is a decision that I made over a year ago. So before October 7th, I had already decided, I think I already put down my deposit.
Mhm.
And because I was in a group container, and I've always wanted to go to Egypt. There's always been, I've had a very strong connection to Isis. I don't feel weird saying that a part of me, oh, and by the way, there's a lot of words that I learned that have been westernized, that's not actually the pronunciation.
Hmm.
So like Isis is actually Isis.
Hmm.
Isis is Isis. It's so hard. Every time I kept asking, how do you say it? How do you say it? How do you say it? I think it's Isis.
Hmm.
Um, in some other dialect, it's Iset,
Hmm.
but most of the locals refer to her as Isis. Um, so Isis, that I was her in a past life.
Hmm.
And I will preface this by saying that that isn't like I'm the only one. I fully believe that as souls, there's fragmented parts, and that multiple people have that connection, that it's not just me. Other people can have I was deceased in a past life. Mary Magdalene, Jesus, Mary Magdalene's, their daughter, Sarah. Um, that's where Magdalene's daughters comes from, is that there are so many of us that have been Sarah. And so I'm here to kind of help collect the sisters of, Magdalene's daughters. So I'm not trying to claim that I'm the only one. It's that years ago, she came in very strongly and was that my part of my soul was her.
Mhm.
So I've always had a strong connection to Egypt, and I've always wanted to go. And so I was in a group container that was, the whole purpose was to learn how to sell. And so this woman, Inara Ariane Griffith, she was in the group with me, and I saw her post about an Egypt trip in November of 2024. And this was like September of 2023. And I immediately was intrigued. And I asked for the information, and she sent me the website with their itinerary, and I was just like mouth dropped open. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Because it was all about like connecting to your queen, right? Like she'd call it the Queen of the Nile, which, by the way, Nile is actually pronounced Neil.
Mm.
Um, so connect, Queen of the Nile, and then also too, if there was men that came, like king. So it was the king and queen energy, and everything that she had written down was just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, including a hot air balloon ride, which I've been like, I've always wanted to go on a hot air balloon ride. Doing it in Luxor over the Valley of the Kings, I was just like, holy moly. So, and I had showed Lee, my husband, I had showed him the itinerary, and was like, because this is a big deal, right? This is a big investment. It's going to another country. basically by myself, and hey, I'm going to go do this thing. Can you stay home and watch the pets? Right. So, I showed him the itinerary and he basically was like, this is you. This is, this is actually made for you.
Mhm.
And my response is right. So getting his kind of stamp of approval, if you will, but not that I was looking for approval, but it's, in relationship, it's nice to get support when you're doing
Yeah.
something big. So, and the interesting thing is that when I connected to that with Anara, there was a couple other people that I saw started to post about Egypt trips, Egypt retreats. And there was one other person in particular, and I was intrigued by her Facebook profile and her the energy through her photos and her words. I watched her on video and it was an immediate no. It was just and me really recognizing through this trip, really connecting to my sacred yes and my sacred no and listening to myself. And I knew, I was like, no, this is not, that's not the direction to go. So I put down the deposit and had, and then had payments that went through the rest of the way. And, soon after I make the deposit, and of course I will say that I didn't know where the money was going to come from. I was like, all right, because flying was on my own, right? My flight. So it was the retreat, which
Mhm.
all of room and board, everything that we do, fully paid for, just not your flight. And then not the hot air balloon ride, and then any tipping or travel insurance, anything.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, like this is an investment. Right? But I trusted. I was like, I don't know, it's gonna happen. It's meant to be. And interestingly enough, I've been working in a nonprofit as a mental health therapist for the last like 10, 12 years at the time of this. Yeah. So at this point, it's now been like 14 years, but at the time it had been about 12 years. And I had applied for student loan forgiveness, and there was a bunch of stuff that happened with the government, and like there was this freeze shut down for like a year and a half
Right.
around being able to have things forgiven. And so I was just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then like a week after I like submitted my deposit and signed the contract, I get this notification that your student loans have been forgiven. I was
Wow.
like,
You can't make this
oh my
up.
God.
You can't make this
Right.
up.
Right. And then get this. That was around the time that October 7th happened. And then a week later, I get a check in the mail for a little over $12,000
Wow.
as a refund for having overpaid.
Wow.
And I literally, the first thing in my mouth was, well, I guess my Egypt trip is paid for.
Wow. I remember you telling me that day and like you like jumping for joy, like elated.
Right? I was just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God. So, and I realized that as part of this Queen of the Nile, I was going to fly first class. I was like, this is at least nonstop a 10-hour flight across like 10-hour time difference. And if I'm doing this pleasure, queen, goddess energy, I'm going to freaking fly like one.
Yeah.
So,
Heck yeah.
and I will say, trying to find flights that get me where I want to be at the time I want to be there and not have ridiculous layovers, either too
Right.
short or too long, was a bit of a needle in a haystack.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it. I was actually quite impressed. And I was not bothered by the $5,000 price tag of the flight. So I'm like, I don't care. Like, it's paid for. But also, too, because there's a lot of, and I keep jumping around.
No, you're good.
There's a story that I'll tell as part of this that is very much a money wound healing. And so I just trusted. I knew that, yes, I'm spending this money. And yet, one of the things I really realized on this trip that I talked about with my retreat buddy, that's what I was calling her, is that when I spend money, I want to be in joy.
Hmm.
I don't want to be in regret. I don't want to be in guilt. I don't want to feel stressed out. I want to be in joy. I want to be in gratitude. I want to be in abundance and full joy when I spend money. And in that, because money is energy, right? Is that it's like going to a party, right? And I want money to feel like we're having a party. And I
Yeah.
want money to be like, oh my God, we're having a party. Like, I want to do more. I want to have more. I want to be more. That's what I want. And if I'm all stressed out, and it's like, well, you're being a party pooper. Like, who wants to hang out with the party pooper? So I realized that very quickly. So I had no stress about I'm spending this money. And so my flight was at 5:30 in the morning. And so I had to be at the airport at like 3 something. And I had my first layover in Dallas, and it was like a 4-hour layover. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I have access to the lounge. Given the fact that I have first class business, I will say that when I bought first class, it forced me into business for a few flights, but my flight from Portland to Dallas was first class. It was more like business seats.
Yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
it was fine. It was okay. Um, and I sat next to this guy who said to me, and this is interesting, right? Because people, when you start talking about your story, there will be times where people won't understand and they'll
Right.
judge and they'll wonder and they'll question. And, he's like, oh, like, who are you going with? Like, you going with friends? And I was like, nope, I'm going I'm on a retreat. So there's a retreat host and there's one other person that's going with me. Originally it was meant to be a lot of people, but we're not going to get into all the details about that. But it ended up being just myself and then one other person, which was actually, I think, as a foreshadowing piece to this, what we experienced would not have happened
Yeah.
had it been anyone else. There was
Yeah. It was all divine.
something very magical about the three of us and our energy together and the magic that we created, and that it was meant to be us the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So even though other people were originally going to go, they weren't meant to go. They weren't meant to be there. So, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You're talking about business class, and you're talking in the
Oh,
manifest
right. Okay, yes.
idea.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy was like, are you going with friends? I was like, no, I'm going on this retreat. I don't know anybody. And he's like shocked by that. And, how, you're not going with anybody you know. And I said, I actually prefer that because, at one point my husband had thought about coming and I said, you can come if you want to, but here's our itinerary. This is what we're doing. Like, is this what you want to be a part of?
Right.
And no, and that's okay. I wasn't expecting him to. But also too, I'm glad that nobody that I know went, because knowing myself and what I have a habit of getting into is very much of the focusing on other people. Are you having fun? Are you okay? Is this working for you? Like, and also within wanting to make sure other people are happy is the not letting myself be my full self, where I might dim, I might tame down, because if you know me and now you might learn something new about me, like, is that going to be a problem? Right. So I actually was completely 100% okay with not knowing anybody. And I had traveled abroad. I did in college, I did a junior year in Scotland. I didn't know anybody. I mean, yes, I was with a group kind of like this, so I knew I was taken care of, but I didn't know anybody. I had to meet new people.
Right.
So it wasn't foreign to me. So that was an interesting kind of, because, and he wasn't the only one. There are other people along my trip that I was talking with who were all like, you're going by yourself? Like, that's, who does that?
Yeah.
And so I get to Dallas and I'm pretty sure that I have access to the lounge. And so I go up to this one desk and she scans my ticket and she's like, actually, you have access to the international lounge. which is like way better. It's like, okay,
Nice.
cool. So I walked down the hall, and that's where that first story was that I told. And I was just so happy. I was just so grateful. And I was like, I'm just going to document this entire thing. So I make a beeline for the bathroom, and I'm just like, holy moly. What dimension have I entered into? And so, they had showers, they had individual bathroom stalls, they had buffet. It was, pour your own alcohol. There was no bar. What you were the bartender. And so they just had open, like, whole
Access.
thing of champagne and wine you could just like get into, a whole wall of hard alcohol you could just pour from. And just buffet, just eat whatever you want. And it was really quiet. I mean, there were quite a few people in there, but it was really quiet and really spacious. I was actually really impressed.
Nice.
And so the biggest thing that I was concerned about, and because my next flight was to London, was, do I have to leave security and go pick up my bag and like get my bag back through, blah, 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 blah. And they said, no, but you likely will have to, because you're changing terminal, you will have to go through a different security yourself. So I was like, okay, that's fine, whatever. And so I fly from Dallas to London, and like I get on the plane, and there'd been a time before I'd flown Delta. And Delta has these, pods, I call them pods, where you're in kind of little cubicle by yourself, and the seat goes out into a bed. And so I had experienced that once before when I had flown first class with Delta. And so this is American now. And we get on the flight, and I'm just like, oh my God, I have a pod. So excited. And so, yeah, I gave that story. I did that story as well. Pillow, blanket, slippers,
Nice.
they had a full menu. And at one point, the woman, because it was an overnight flight, right? So it was basically like, you're sleeping. It was like a 4 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. flight. And so the woman was asking each of us, do you want me to wake you up? When we start serving breakfast, do you want to be woken up? And I said, no, like I don't. I brought melatonin with me because I figured I'd have jet lag, but I didn't take any on the flight, and I barely slept. I had a new book with me, and I basically read the entire book. And I was just so excited that I tried. I think I maybe dozed off, maybe napped a little bit, but I was just so excited. And so get to London. Heathrow is I will say this. The fascinating thing traveling abroad is experiencing different airports in other countries and how they do things.
Yeah.
And I just didn't understand.
I agree. I remember that about Heathrow. Yeah.
And Cairo too. Cairo's very, and Luxor. Luxor, they're the same, but very similar. Like, we're not going to show you your gate until an hour before your flight leaves.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you're posting the gate at the time of boarding. Like, I don't understand.
I know, right? It's crazy.
It was just, and so I'm looking at this board, and I'm like, I don't know how to read this. I don't know what this means. Like, what is, and everyone's just, and we're talking 6:30 in the morning. It is a packed airport. It is just like so many people at 6:30 in the morning, and it is so loud, and there's so many shops. It was just, it was insane.
And it's huge, Heathrow.
Yes.
It's huge. And it's a monster of an airport.
I was in one terminal. I don't remember what terminal I was in, but I had to get to this other terminal, and it was interesting because this woman goes like, come on, get on the train. I start kind of running. So you don't have to run. And I'm like, you're telling me to hurry, and you're telling me, I don't know. Weird.
Anyway.
And so like get on the tram, and it's a good 5-minute drive.
Yeah.
It was insane. And so, and the security, like, it's like, okay, you had to, in order to get through these like open gates, you had to give your boarding pass.
Yeah.
But then you had to do it again when you got to this, where you go through security. It was a little bizarre.
Yes.
It gets worse in Cairo. But so that was interesting. But then I get to, so now I'm flying British Airways,
Okay.
and I get up to that lounge, and they had you check in twice. Like you checked in at one, one desk, and then you go up this escalator, and you got to check in again. And I'm
Hmm.
like, what? Like it's less than a. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
maybe 500 steps. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Anyways, so so I was there long enough to, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, do the things. And I wasn't even hungry. So I think I had some coffee, and I
Mhm.
sat for a little bit and just chilled out, and then got on my flight to Cairo. Um, and business on, it's a 5-hour flight, and business on British Airways is not really business. Like,
Hmm.
I don't really know what I paid for other than
Yeah.
like it was 3 rows, like 3 seats. So there was a middle seat. Um, and you had, you had a little more leg room, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like, when you think about business class and you get big seats and
Yeah.
a lot of room, and it wasn't like that at all. Um, it was odd to me that I'm paying business first class and you've got me like in economy.
Hmm.
Um, but I got a meal out of it. So, but yeah, so get to Cairo and find out that my my retreat host, she was supposed to come in with me. Like we were going to be on the same flight from London to Cairo,
Right.
and I felt good about that. I was like, okay, like yes, the travel agency that she hired was going to have people come and pick us up and be able to move us.
Mhm.
We were taken care of, but it was kind of nice to have the idea that I was going to be with her.
Yes.
Um, my retreat buddy was coming in way later. We'll come to find out she missed the flight.
Oh no.
And it was the whole thing that was
Oh
part
no.
of her initiation, her journey.
Right.
But she missed the flight.
Oh no.
And which she's like, this never happens to me. I never miss flights. But because of the chaos that she was in related to her business with something, an investment situation, she lost track of time and missed the flight. So I'm like,
No.
okay, I'm by myself. So I get there, and there is a gentleman, like with this whole sign with my name on it.
Aw.
And he got me through customs, and drove, got in the van. And now I will say that I learned a lot about tipping. Like before I went, tipping's a big thing. Like you tip basically everything, any service. Unless, of course, it is your discretion. And if you don't feel like it was a good service, you don't have to tip. But,
Right.
tipping is very customary in Egypt. And I'm stressed out about this. I'm like, what's adequate? Like, and the conversion, right? I downloaded a conversion app onto my phone and trying to understand, like, okay, what, and I wanted to get Egyptian money. So we stopped off at a bank before we left, and I'm bringing $600 in cash with me. And he's like, you don't need to get more than $150 out. And I was like, what? That's ridiculous, but I don't believe you. And he's like, no, you really only need like 150 max. And I was like, okay. So, and then I get this like 9,000 pounds, like
Yeah.
wad of cash back. And so, but I'm just stressed out about tipping, right? I want
Right.
to make
Right.
sure that I'm tipping well. And so drive about 45 minutes to the hotel, and we were, I mean, we were in the heart of Giza. And it was, I mean, Cairo, it's interesting. The one thing that we talked a lot about with our tour guides is how rich Egypt is, and yet how significantly poor they are.
Hmm.
It's very poor, a very poor country. People, very poor people. The country is rich. The country is
Mhm.
um, abundant, if you will, but the people themselves are very poor. And it was very evident in the streets. It was very evident in, so many stray dogs, so many stray cats. It was dirty, very dirty.
Hmm.
Just generally speaking, it was so cloudy, smoggy, very smog. Like, and
Hmm.
at first I thought it was because, like, oh, the desert, and maybe it's dust from the sand, but no, it's smog. It was so fascinating to be driving, or a passenger, and they've got, 4 or 5 lanes, but nobody's using the lanes. It is 4 or 5 lanes, but 12 cars across.
Free for all. Yeah.
It was a free for
Wow.
all, and no accidents. I didn't see an accident, and but just watching is like, oh, you're just brrr. It was just constant. And at one point, we were driving to the airport, and I saw this, like a moped kind of
Hmm.
situation, but this very large, like, we're talking at least 10 feet tall, maybe 12 feet
Wow.
tall, mound of something. And there was this, like, 10-year-old kid sitting on top, going down the freeway. I was
Wow.
like, wow. Um, but so we were in the heart of Giza, which was, she had picked this hotel because the view was the pyramids and the Sphinx. They had a terrace, and they had a terrace on the second level, and then on the fourth level was this rooftop, and pyramids right there. But it was very much in the I wouldn't necessarily say unsafe, but our tour guide told us, do not leave the hotel without us.
Hmm.
Do not go outside without us present. I was like, okay, I don't have a problem with that.
Hmm.
Um, so I check in, and there's a little bit of a misunderstanding around, like, who's it under. I'm like, please, I have a room. Please, I have a room. I have a room. And so I did. And I will say that first night, I felt so dysregulated. I felt very, um, it was hard. It was hard being there kind of by myself, but also to, like, the room. There was no window really. So it
Hmm.
was basically this box, and it felt very, I felt very claustrophobic. Um, and so kind of had a little bit of a panic. But I I grounded. I went up to the rooftop. I, like, connected to the pyramids, did some energy work, and kind of cleared everything out. And I was like, this is okay. Like, of course I'm discombobulated, right? This is, the energy here is way different.
Hmm.
I'm even in this moment of, stepping foot on the land, my body is clearing, right? So, um, but yeah, so let's fast
Ask you a
forward.
question.
Yes.
How was it seeing the pyramids for the first time?
The whole entire, like, I would say, well, because we were in Cairo for 2.5 days, 2.5, 3 days.
Mhm.
It's completely surreal the entire time. It was, I'm not here. This isn't happening. This is fake. I I don't
Yeah.
believe this. Like, it was every morning I woke up and I went outside and I looked. I was like, and every evening watching the sunset, I was like, I can't believe I'm here. It
Yeah.
felt very surreal the entire time.
Hmm.
Um, and even being in Luxor, which we'll get into, it was
Yeah.
it was very hard for my human to really comprehend. Um, but no, that's a really great question. And even my retreat buddy, same thing. Like, this isn't real. This is not happening. Are we really here? Is this, it was just a lot of that. Um, so the next
One more
morning,
question before you get into it. What did you learn from the journey of getting there? Like, because I know when you go on such a long trek and you're leading up to this place, and there's this excitement and there's this nervousness, and I'm doing this on my own, and this is an experience I've never done before, and you're having people in your ear being like, "Can you believe that you're doing this?" Like, what did you learn from being in that, like, queen energy and being in first class and having that experience leading up to even being there and in the room and um
it's interesting because I don't know which flight it was. I don't know. Oh, no, it was my flight from London to Cairo, and I was sitting in this window seat, and interestingly enough, both flights from London to Cairo and Cairo to London was on British Airways in this whole setup.
Mm-hmm.
And like nobody in business class picked middle seats. It was people in aisles and windows, and none of
Yeah.
the middle seats were chosen, which I found fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So he and I had a seat in between us, and without even me, like I get on the plane and I had a carry on, and he just picked it up for me and put it in the overhead bin.
Hmm.
And then when we landed, he like got it out for me. And that was a lot of my experience, of people just being helpful, people being um, giving. I kind of noticed where I was already embodying the queen energy without me even like intentionally, consciously doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But every time someone was supportive or helpful, or it was just so much of a gratitude and so much of a thank you, and also to and of course, like there was this sense of course I get to have this, of course I get to receive this, which I found like now that you're asking me that, I totally forgot that was a lot of my experience. So the next morning, get up, and her name is Patty. Patty had gotten in really late. We're talking like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so there was kind of an idea that maybe we'd let her sleep. And I will say that along this journey, there was an itinerary, but every once in a while things would shift, and oh, we're doing this instead, or we're doing this first, or kind of thing. And so a lot of it was, I'm like, I'm just going with the flow. Like, you tell me where you want me to be and I will be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, by the way, Egypt eats falafels in the morning for breakfast.
Wow.
Didn't know if you knew that. That's a breakfast thing.
No.
Yes, you can get falafels throughout the day supposedly, but it's really a breakfast item.
Hmm.
And so I had falafel and homemade. Like, we're
Mm.
talking, I watched them do the thing and then fry it up and then bring it to the table.
Wow.
And so had omelet and falafel for breakfast every morning. Coffee was amazing. It was like the first morning I had the best Americano I've ever had.
Wow.
It was incredible. And so I'm sitting out, just like in awe of the pyramids and the Sphinx, and just, I can't believe we're sitting here and I'm watching this. And we decided, or I don't remember how it played out, but I want to share my intention, because one of the things that we had talked about as a trio was, what is our intention for this trip, or for this journey? I wouldn't even call it a trip. It was an entire like immersive experience. And I knew me going to Egypt was a lot of me no longer hiding,
Hmm.
me really being in my full expression, full goddess, priestess, oracle, whatever you want to call me. Like, I just knew. And I will say that before we um before I went to Egypt, both of us received an astrology reading.
Oh.
It's called evolutionary astrology,
Oh, cool.
or the person who did it. She's amazing. I don't know why I've never heard of her before. Her name Georgia. I can't remember. I can't remember her last name. Begins with a T. She's phenomenal. She validated a lot of what I already heard other astrologers say of me, which is basically that I am the divine healer. In the past, it's been like, yeah, okay, sure, like everyone's a healer, but it's like, no, like your chart, like, is very much written in neon sign that you are a divine healer. So, but there's things that she told me about that were both validating, but also two things for me to pay attention to, things for me to notice on this trip. And one of it was that I'm there for me. I'm there to help my healing journey, but I was also there for the region.
Oh, wow.
I know we've talked before in a previous episode about how I feel about Palestine and how I feel about the Middle East and indigenous people. And we'll get into it further on the line when we get into talking about Luxor, but just how much destruction white colonial patriarchal system has destroyed history, destroyed people, destroyed because they don't understand, and because it's foreign, and because it doesn't align with their beliefs, that let's just wipe out an entire people. Let's just destroy art. Let's destroy history. Like so much defacing and beheading of ancient statues. Like it was heartbreaking. And so I knew that I was there with me being a divine healer. I also knew I was there to heal the land. And going in, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that would look like. But a lot of it was like, I'm no longer going to hide. I'm no longer going to pretend that I am not who I am, and that I'm not here to do what I'm meant to do. And I'm going to be my bigness. I'm going to be big. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be massive. I'm going to own my too muchness. I'm too much. And I'm going to own that. And so that was one of my first intention was, I'm no longer going to be small. I'm no longer going to hide. Like I'm full out. I'm fully open. Like, let's go. And Patty had her own intention, and Inara had her own intention. And so that's what set the tone for like the rest of the trip. And the first day was let's go see the pyramids. And so our tour guide, she's an Egyptologist, amazing woman, like had so much information and so much love and passion, and also to this like bold queen feminine like presence about her. And so got Patty up and, kind of knocked on the door like, hey, we're going to go do this thing. It may be good for you to come with us. And so we went and we walked all around the pyramids. We could have gone in, but that was a whole other thing. And I was like, you know what, next trip to Egypt, I will go inside. But we just did the outside of the pyramids. And Anara had brought her crystal singing chalice. It was not a bowl, but a chalice. And so she brought that with her. And she was wanting to have space to play it at different places. And our tour guide's like, Egypt, like the police, the security, they don't understand. They're not going to be open to that. We're going to have to be in secret. We're going to have to like do it quietly, do it quickly. Like, you got to be really mindful of that. We were also told, don't take pictures with the children. Don't interact with them. Don't engage with them. Like, just move on by. And interestingly enough, the day that we were there is like, there were so many kids. And I asked, I was like, what is this? Why are there so many kids here? Like, this is they grew up here. Why are they showing up here? And a lot of it is kids from not Cairo, but from, villages and outskirts who come in, and they're there to see the tourists. They're there to take pictures of the tourists and to post them on social media and be like, look, I have an American friend, and thing. But when you say you ask to one, you've got a swarm of kids that are now following you and will not leave you alone, and who are just like constantly like,
How interesting is that? Like, you're in front of the most beautiful like landmark, one of the most beautiful landmarks in the world, and the kids are looking at you like, with that same awe,
Selfie, selfie, selfie. They kept saying selfie, selfie, selfie. And so we found a space. We went kind of like around and in between these couple of rocks, and she's like, okay, let's do it. And so we sat down, and she sat down with us, and our tour guide was our bodyguard and our lookout. She kind of kept an eye out for security to show up. And so we're doing this initiation to set the tone. And Nara's amazing, by the way. Like, she's very much like me in the sense that when I'm doing a channeling or I'm doing a guided journey for someone, I don't know what's going to come through. It's just I open up my channel and whatever's going to come through is going to come through. And same thing for her. And it just so profound. That first day, though, I struggled with it because the kids came and they were just like just talking and talking. And I'm thinking to myself, can you just, I know this is new for you and this is different and you have no idea what's going on and you're excited. But I'm thinking to myself, kids, can you just sit and be quiet? Because I couldn't hear her. Like I could not hear her over their chatter and just constant talking and disrupt. My human would say they disrupted. What my soul understands is like how this kind of, because I had my eyes closed for most of it. I kind of peeked my eyes open a little bit a few times, but they had surrounded us. And so it was almost as if there was this cocooning of children, right? A lot of them were teenagers. But like just this, it almost felt as though as much as it was disruptive for my human, there was this sense of care and like encirclement that happened with children.
There must have been an activation for them in that too, you know?
Yeah. Yes. And there was something that kept showing up about children. And I think the biggest thing that has been so devastating for me about this genocide is the children. We won't get into it, but that has, so it was just this theme that kept coming up with children. And so then all of a sudden the tour guide's like, security's coming. It's like, okay, we're done. put the thing away, like get up, and so it was a really cool experience. We went to this restaurant that is basically like right on site, had an amazing meal. I cannot stand baba ganoush, but Egyptian baba ganoush is way different than Lebanese or any other Middle Eastern, Mediterranean baba ganoush. Very like I could have eaten it all day long.
Wow.
And we had this overlooking the pyramids, and so beautiful lunch, expensive drinks. I didn't realize that Egypt, they're not into alcohol. They don't drink. And so any alcohol that we did have, like my drink ended up being $20. Like, I mean, pounds, it seems like, oh, that's not a big deal. But then once you add it all up and you do the conversion, it's like, oh, that was a $20 drink. Not doing that again. But that was great. That was a great first day.
Quick question before you move to the next day. If you were to try, and I'm sure this is a hard question to answer, but if you were to describe what it felt like to be in the presence of the pyramids when you were so close and the Sphinx, how would you describe that?
So one of the things that I didn't, in Inara brought up around the Sphinx that we'll talk about, it was great with the Egyptologist because there was a lot of education information that she provided that's starting to become more known, more aware, that a lot of people didn't know about. And there used to be a belief that it was a burial site, right? But when they went into the pyramids, there's no tombs. There's no, there was no one buried like in the actual pyramids. And what I learned that I didn't know about until this trip was that the people who built the pyramids, number one, did not know this either, that they actually started from the top down. So all the sand, so when you see the pyramid, like there was sand covering everything from the very top. And so they built it from the top down and removed the sand as they went. Did not know that. The other thing is that there were no slaves. It was all voluntary. And it was only for a few months out of the year. And it was the months out of the year where there was no harvest. There was no, it was winter, if you will. And so people would, and it was an honor. It was an honor to build these. They're basically temples.
Mhm.
It's all about the death and rebirth. It's about the connecting to Ra, who's their god, right? The sun, and the way that the pyramids are like the east to west, and red granite. I mean, it's not all just sandstone or whatever
Mhm.
material. There was like we're talking like big freaking slabs of red granite.
Hmm.
The way that everything got put together, particularly that there's a temple right outside of the Sphinx, and precision, straight line, everything adding up, everything connecting, and
Yeah.
it was just so there's no words to describe the artistry and the
Mhm.
architect, but also too the fact that this was an act of love. All three of them. There was the king, the son, and the grandson. And so there's the big one,
Mhm.
the major one, and then there's one, and then the third one didn't get completed entirely. I don't think, is from what I understood. But they were all out of an act of love and worship, and they are starting to find actual burial sites on the property,
Hmm.
and they were of the workers.
Hmm.
If you were a slave, you wouldn't have been buried there.
Right.
It
Right.
was people of, I wouldn't say necessarily stature, but people that the king invited in to, come and help me build this.
Mhm.
And people said yes of their own volition. And 3 months out of every year, they would go and they would build. Um, with the Sphinx, it was a rock that was in the way, and
Hmm.
it was too big to move. So what was ended up being requested was to create something out of it. And so it's like it's chiseled into, there's this huge rock that was then chiseled into the Sphinx. And the thing that Inara brought forward for me as we were standing there staring, I was staring at the Sphinx, and I was just like, this is unreal, unreal. Um, just the detail, it's quite incredible. Um, and she made some comment. I don't remember exactly what she said, but the gist of it was that related to my not hiding,
Hmm.
that the beauty that got created in the chiseling away, little by little, the layers that got removed, and even in the beauty, there's imperfections. And it reminded me of a phrase years ago, back when we were doing um, success resources.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was Mission to Millions. I don't remember what it was, or it was I can't remember which one it was.
Those were the
Um,
courses we met, just to set
yeah,
the context for
yeah,
you
sorry.
listeners.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
courses where we first met back in 2007.
17.
Yeah,
17?
yeah,
Yeah.
2017. So there was a course that I took, and Perfectly Imperfect came through for me years ago. And so as we're standing there, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm being reminded of that. And that, so there was a connection between the Sphinx and myself that I didn't recognize until Inara said something.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was just very, like, there's so much love in that area, even though there's all these, thousands of tourists around. Um, just the energy of being there, and what has stood the test of time, and out of love. It was incredible.
Wow. I have
Yeah.
another question for you.
Yeah.
Do you feel like being in the presence of the pyramids is what activated this awakening, for a lack of a better term, that you're experiencing? The reason I ask is I went to Chichen Itza in Mexico, which is another pyramid structure, right before Success Resources and my whole life coaching, business, personal development journey happened. And the moment that I could pinpoint in my journey was how I got activated by those. So I was curious when it comes to this new version of self that's being birthed to you, do you feel like the energy of them played a part in it?
My first initial instinct is no.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until I got to Luxor.
Oh, wow.
But but yes. So when I feel into it more, yes. The next day was when we had a photo shoot.
Okay.
Um, and so that was a big day. We had a photo shoot early in the morning, and then we went to a museum, and then I had my whole cartouche situation, which we'll talk about in a second. But I would say in a subtle way.
Hmm.
I think that the pyramids were more subtle.
Okay.
There was more of a Luxor was very much in my face.
Hmm.
Luxor was and we'll get into the who and the what, probably second episode part two.
Yeah.
But that was very much of that was a pow. I feel like the pyramids was more of a gentle breeze,
Okay.
which I would say is very fascinating because of
Yeah.
how grand they are.
Yeah.
It was more of, I would say it felt very much grandfatherly,
Oh.
whereas Luxor was full on divine feminine goddess. It's like
Hmm.
warrior. There was this I mean loving warrior, but Luxor was warrior-esque, whereas the pyramids felt more grandfatherly, wise, quiet wisdom.
You know what I
Um,
wonder? You
yeah.
know how you're talking about this retreat's theme is about like king and queen energy, but obviously it was primarily queen goddess energy. I
Mhm.
wonder if that was creating some sort of duality within you. Like your masculine is such
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
like that effort that comes through you, that like that part of
Yeah.
you has been already so like integrated. You've done a lot of work on that. That's like kind of like a natural state that you've embodied, so that's why that had to be so quiet, and the feminine goddess activation, for a lack of a better term, was so much louder.
I will say, yeah, I feel like it was interesting because as we all reflected back on the entire 9-10 days, the trajectory of things, the way things flowed was very much divine alignment for each of us.
Hmm.
That Cairo had to come first. It was very masculine. I will say that it was, now that you're mentioning this, yes, it was very masculine. It was very go go go, do. We were on a schedule. We were time here, time there.
Hmm.
It was a lot of me making decisions, right? Um, and and throughout the entire, and it really became interesting when I got into Luxor, the where I embodied it, right? So where there was a masculine and a feminine that showed up for me, in my where I said yes, where I said no, where I did, where I leaned back. Where,
Hmm.
like, it's the very much of, and that we'll get into that. It was
Yeah.
very fascinating, but I feel like Cairo is very busy. It's very loud. It's very in your face in a different way.
Okay.
A little exhausting. But I definitely there was a necessary foundational setting of the masculine that needed to show up there in order to make space for what happened in Luxor. Um, but the second day we were there was a very big day. So we had our photo shoot, and that was incredible. It was the first time I ever had, a professional photo shoot before. I didn't know what I was
Oh,
doing.
wow.
I was just like, do I do this? Do I do, like, how do you want me to stand? What is it? Um, and at one point, because she wanted me like walking, And she kept saying catwalk, catwalk. I'm like, I'm not a model. I don't know what you want from me.
Yeah.
But I got the photos back, and like there's at least 10 of them, 10, 12, maybe 13 that I'm absolutely in love with, that are incredible. That I'm, spitting with. But we went everywhere. We started on one side of the pyramids, and we went around. We ended up doing photos in front of the Sphinx. It was, I think we were together it's the three of us. We all got photos. I think we were together for like 3-4 hours.
Wow.
It was incredible. And that day there was a group of kids, small kids. When it was teenagers, I was like, no, teenagers, I'm not taking photos with you. But there was this group of about maybe 10 kids. They all had to have been under the age of 10.
Mm.
And our main tour guide was with us that day. His name's Omar. Omar's amazing. And he was with us that day. And he leans over to me and he says, they want to take a photo with you. And I saw the woman, and I said to him, I was like, we can do that, but like, that's it. Like a photo, and then they're not following us. Like I'll do a photo with them, but then like they need to go. And so he conveyed that to them, and he's like, okay. And so so I looked at them. I was like, okay, come here. And they all just like swarmed me. It's like
Oh,
the cutest thing. And they were just so happy. It was cute. And then of course I had a bunch of teenagers like want to come over and bother me because it's just what happens. They see you take a photo, and then everyone else like starts, like vultures. But most of them are respectful. They kind of came after you a little bit, but then it's just move on. And I smiled and said, no, not today. So yeah, so that was a very impactful day, or at least morning. And then we went
quick
to
question before you move on. What do you feel like was activated inside of you from having this shoot? The reason I ask is Natalie already showed me some of the photos, and like you look so radiant, like so the sense of ease about you that I've never seen in one of your photos before. Like this, like on a soul level, like this remembrance of like who you are, soul to soul, like because we've known each other for multiple lifetimes, right? So I was wondering, like, what was that experience like for you? Because you're talking about this, overcoming this fear of being seen. And
Mhm.
when you're having your first photo shoot, I know from having photo shoots in the past, there's this vulnerability that comes up when you're being showcased, for a lack of a better term, in that
Mhm.
way. So what was that like for you?
Um, the first photo shoot was because we had two photo shoots. We had one at the pyramids, and then we had a second one in Luxor at this palace turned hotel. And I will say up front, they're very different experiences. This one, with the pyramids, how do I describe that? There was just a knowing. I think it was when I think about and compare to the more goddess one that I had, there was just more of a knowing with this one. I was more at ease. I was more, and the vibe that I was going with that one was like a quiet power.
It was
It
fierce.
Yeah, and I think that when I say quiet, I
Mhm.
mean more of what I really desire. As much as I speak, and as much as I have a defined throat and I have things to say, I also very much desire for my energy to speak for itself. And so, like, without having to say anything, without me having
Mhm.
to explain myself, I just want my energy to exude out and for people to just know.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the word quiet, it's more so of which isn't to say not fierce or not
Yeah, yeah.
powerful, but it's
You're not trying, you're just being,
yeah.
is what it kind of felt like. And like by you being in that energy, there was this natural fierceness that happens. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if you'd be comfortable in sharing this photo after this recording, but there's this photo that you're walking like towards the camera, and there's the Sphinx behind you. And I told Natalie, I'm like, you look like you're in an action movie, and there's about to be like this fire coming behind you, like, you know, that those
Is that the
traditional
one with
series.
the sunglasses?
Yeah, like you're like slow motion walking, you know, those scenes in a movie, and then boom, like everything happens behind you, and they're unfazed because they're just in this zone, like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is one of the photos that I plan on my own socials that I plan on utilizing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was towards the end of the photo shoot. That was like one of the last stops we made before we went to the Sphinx. And by then I was definitely in like in our, I will say, the photographer who I'm gonna give credit for on when I do post, she made things so easy. Like,
Good.
there's such an ease about her, and she was so laid back, and she gave some direction, but she kind of just let me do what I wanted to do. And then she'd show me the photos in between, and you know, so many of them I was just like, oh my God, like, yes, like, this is what, you know, you're capturing it. I think like what I was talking about around with the pyramids, interestingly enough, you know, you'd think with the pyramids, they're loud, and they're not. And like I said, it's very grandfatherly. It's very just this quiet, stoic, wise, grandfatherly energy. And I think that that's what came through from that. That's the energy that I connected with. It didn't feel like it was in your face. And that's where I think too, there's that surrealness to it. 'Cause it's like, they're so freaking powerful. And yet there's just this ethereal lightness that shows up there. You know, you're standing there like, and you're looking up, like, I'm literally like, you're not supposed to, people got yelled at after I got down. So they didn't catch me, but you're not supposed to be up on the pyramid.
Oh, wow.
And we went, and like, I put my hands like on the pyramid, and at one point, oh no, it was in Luxor that happened. I put my hands on the pyramid and just kind of connected, but there was just this quietness. It was like everything just went quiet. And so when I got up onto this ledge and I like looked up, and it's just stone for days.
Wow.
And it seems massive, but it's not. Like, I don't know how to describe it. So there was just this gentle, quiet, light energy to them, that it made it easy for me just to be. And I had a lot of fun. It wasn't stressful at all. My goddess one was a little stressful. We'll talk about that. But it wasn't stressful at all. And it was quite incredible, like, what she captured. And now that we're talking this, like, I want to go back and look, because I don't think I really realized how peaceful, like, the energy, I mean, other than that one where it looks like I'm about to like blow up everything. But there's just this quiet peacefulness to it that I want to go back and look at.
But you're not blowing up anything. You're
No.
like, you know, yeah, I want to be clear. Yeah, like,
I'm not blowing up anything, but it looks like there could be fire like behind me.
yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So there's one other piece that I want to share before we take a break. So a little bit of a backstory. So Lee's birthday is coming up, his 50th birthday. And I had heard a story from his mom that when he was a teenager, his grandmother had gone to Egypt and had bought him a cartouche. And cartouche, some people pronounce it differently, just like Neil and Nile. I remember, I think the last night I said the word cartouche, and then an Egyptian woman and her fiance are all like, they got all kind of giddy because I think I said it correctly. But so, and for those of you who are watching this, not just hearing it on the podcast audio, but if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm wearing a cartouche. And so it's a little bit of a, so these are actually symbols that are all over the temples. If you go to, especially in Luxor, all the temples in Luxor have these symbols, and it's this oval kind of oval shape with like there's a almost as if there's a stand at the bottom, a line at the bottom, and there are hieroglyphs. Is that what they're called? Hieroglyphs.
Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphs. There's hieroglyphs that are written on every one of them within all the temples. And so for jewelry purposes, what Egyptians had created were cartouches where you can have on the front side, you can have whatever images you want. You can have whatever hieroglyphs you want. This one has an ankh for life and eternal life. There is a scarab, which is some people say it's for good luck, but I heard it's transformation. And then there's the Eye of Horus, which is protection.
Oh, wow.
And then on the back, you can get your name. Like this, each letter of your name has a different symbol, and you can get that, engraved on. And so Lee's grandmother, back when he was a teenager, went to Egypt, and she got him one with his name on it. And then I guess he lost it. And it wasn't that I was trying to replace it, but as I was thinking about different people in my life and wanting to get gifts for people and, yes, I'd buy myself a bunch of stuff, but I was like, okay, this is a huge trip. I would like to get people gifts. And so I was thinking about different people and what I wanted to get them. And I kept thinking, what do I want to get him? What do I want to get him? I don't know. And so I said, I'm going to get him a cartouche. And so I asked our guides, hey, like, if I wanted to do this, where might be a good place to go? We were going to go shopping one day. Well, they're like, oh, there's a jewelry shop right next to the oil perfume place that we're going to go to. It's like, great. So we had already planned on going to this oil place, and this one oil place, all their perfumes, the way that they distill everything is very pure. There's no alcohol in them. And so we did a bunch of smelling of scents, and they put us like all over our body, right? They're like, here's a drop, here's a drop, here's a drop. Like, and after a while, like, your senses get all fried. But I bought some oils, and then they also had a lot of glass pieces there. And so I bought, they had ornaments, and then they had perfume holders, and they had incense holders. And so I bought a bunch of stuff, and they're like, oh, we can ship it to you. I'm telling you this for a reason. We'll ship it to you. And so I was like, great. Like, here's my address. Here's my phone number. I pay you. You'll get it shipped to me. The guy's like, 5 days. I'm like, cool, great. Maybe by the time I get home, it'll be there. We go to the jewelry shop, and we get taken downstairs, and I get brought to this case, and they're all gold pieces. And I'm not thinking anything of it. Don't even ask about silver. Don't ask for anything else. I'm just immediately like looking at a case full of gold cartouches, and they certify 18 karat gold. I'm sure I could have gotten other, but they don't do 14. 18 is the lowest. And I immediately saw a piece for Lee that I absolutely loved. And I was thinking I wanted one for myself. And so I'm looking, and I think this might have been the second or third one that I picked up. And he's telling me, and we're working at pricing, and he's telling me pricing. And I keep in mind, most people are either talking to me in pounds, like in Egyptian money, or they're talking to me in US money. That's how it's been the past like 2 days, is either here's what it is in Egyptian and here's what it is in American. When I went over to the what do you want to call it? The oil place, they told me the price in American. So I'm here talking to a gentleman who very thick accent, and so we all go downstairs, right? Anara, Patty, our tour guide, they all come downstairs with me. But then at some point, they're gone, and it's just me by myself. And so I'm, figuring out pricing, and he's talking to me, and we'll fast forward for a second. He was talking to me in euro. He kept saying euro.
Hmm.
But I didn't hear him say euro.
Hmm.
I heard him say pound. Like that's how I was computing it. I
Right.
don't work in euro. Like I don't even know what.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I was like, oh, that's British, right? That's the British euro or the UK, whatever it is. But I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm thinking he's talking pound, and so he's telling me the price, and I'm going into my conversion thing, and I'm like putting it out, and I'm looking at the US price, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so cheap. Like, okay, sure, like that sounds like a great deal. Yeah, I'll take them. Thinking nothing of it. And then he wants to like sell me chains. And, we're talking like full on gold chains. And then he's telling me the entire price and, a chain for me, a chain for Lee. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Like, this is great. Like,
Yeah.
Thinking I'm about to spend maybe a couple $100. Go upstairs, pay the thing. And of course, I'm, they're going to, they take some time to like do the stuff. And
Yeah.
so my tour guide person says like, I'll make sure and get them for you, like before, because we're going to leave for Luxor the next day.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I will get them for you. I was like, okay, I trust. I walk outside. I'm excited. I am so freaking excited. I felt so good in the entire experience. And I get in my car and I pull out my phone, and I love my bank. My bank will send me alerts. Like,
Yeah.
yes or no, fraud alert, yes or no, did you spend this
Yeah.
amount? And I'm looking at my phone and I'm like blinking. I'm like, what? Like $8,000.
What?
$8,000. And we're driving away. And I'm just like, I don't wait, what? I was just like, I'm having like a brain aneurysm. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I did the conversion. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
what? And of course, I've got Anara and the tour guide person telling me gold's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
that's not how much it would be. And I'm just thinking, I'm not prepared to spend
Yeah.
$8,000
Yeah. Yeah.
on jewelry. Like that's
Right.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, I'm being asked, do you want to turn back? And I just made a sacred yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So we go back. And I don't know how we ended. I don't know. It was why is this taking so long to get back? I don't know what happens, but like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like we were gone that long, but it took a
Yeah.
while to get back.
Yeah.
And so then the tour host, like the Omar,
Yeah.
he went in with me.
Yeah.
And I was just and the guy who was helping me comes up and he's telling me, he's like, euro. And I said, that doesn't,
What?
I'm
Like, yeah.
US dollar.
Yeah.
I thought you meant pound.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. And so then the owner ends up, we go downstairs and the owner's there, and he ends up like giving me a deal. Like he was like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you know what? I just want a full refund. And I don't know if I want to do this at all. Maybe I'll just get Lee's. And I won't do the chains. I'm not doing chains. Like we can buy our own. Like, and this one I already had. A chain that I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, I already have a chain that I can just put this on. And so we go in and he gives me the pricing. And it actually would have been, the deal he gave me would have been cheaper, if you will, if I'd gotten both of them. And so, and I was comfortable spending $3,000. Like, I just immediately was like, yes, I will do that. I don't want the chains. And then he's all like, okay, well, we'll do this. And then I'll show you chains. And I'm like, that's fine. If you want, and they can be pretty pushy. Egyptian can be pretty pushy when it comes to a sale. And I was like, that's fine. If you want to show me chains later, that's fine. But like, let's just, okay. So I had to do a whole full refund and then new thing. I'm feeling good about it. But then I'm leaving and get back and trying to go to sleep. And I'm now at this point taking melatonin because I'm not sleeping. I'm like basically going to bed at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night and waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, wide awake. And that's now been happening for like a week and a half, by the way. And so, I wake up in a panic
Hmm.
because I start having like my money wounds coming up. Uh the what's we call it? The buyer's remorse,
Mhm.
right? I'm having this feeling of, oh my gosh, what if Lee's upset that I'm spending this much money on him, spending this much money at all? And then what if he doesn't like it? And then what if like I'm out this money and right, I'm having this like freak out. And so of course everyone's in bed, but time zone wise I'm like, oh, my current coach that I'm working with, she's awake. So I message her like 2 o'clock in the morning my time, which is really like afternoon for her, a day behind. And so I'm just like, hey, I could really use some support here. And she helped to remind me that the joy that I was in. So this is what we're talking from the beginning, right? The joy that I was in when I initially went down there. And I'm remembering like it didn't phase me. But also too, it didn't phase me when I thought it was a certain price, right? So then recognizing that, oh, okay, my money wound of spending money and spending large amount of money, how do I want to work through this? How do I want to support myself? And I recognized that it felt really good to spend it when I was in joy. The moment that I let my ancestral and my past self, but also to like my childhood wounds show up around, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're spending that. What's wrong with you kind of vibe. Um, that that if money was no object, I would have had no problem getting them. Right. So it was me recognizing that when I'm in joy, money works with me. And I get to decide what I want it to mean, but I also get to decide, like, through the energy of moving through this, that I will be taken care of. I will be supported. There's a reason that I got these. There's a reason that the energy was there. It's trusting that it's like when I purchased the tickets, right? Not the tickets. When I signed up for this and I was like, I do not know where the money is going to come from, but I know I'm meant to go to Egypt and it will all work out. And then a week later, I less than 2 weeks later, I've got a wad of cash. It was one of those, I said yes because the energy was aligned. It's trusting and working through that wound of, I understand the anxiety, I understand the fear, and I'm also not going to live my life making decisions from that. So that was a big takeaway.
Wow.
Um, and then the next morning we left to go to Luxor. And I remember being really excited about my breakthrough that I had. And I had an interaction. I won't get into the details of it, but I had an interaction where I felt, what's what I'm looking for? Um, Not invalidated. I mean, kind of invalidated, but more so like I'm not allowed. Um, and that I I need to be a certain way. And that was interesting for me to receive that and to have my, oof, I need to protect myself. I need kind of almost like a shutdown mode and like I don't know if you're a safe person, even though I initially thought you were, but maybe now you're not. And it took me about, and I got into observer mode. I got into, okay, like I'm just going to observe and and really tapping into my 5 line and recognizing that, okay, I am a catalyst. I'm an instigator. People will project onto me and I will also instigate people's triggers. Um, and so I can hold this. I can do this. I can rise to being the leader that I am meant to be, which means nope, not hiding, because here's a way where I can hide. And so, but I got into that quiet power. I got into that. I don't need to say anything. I don't need to call you out on it. I don't need to bring light to it. I don't need to give energy to that. I get to be me, and I get to process this however I want to process it. I also get to discern who I'm going to process it with. And nope, I'm not going to do that with you anymore. But also, too, I didn't let that taint the rest of my time, because I could have. An old self of mine would have held on to that tightly and used that as an excuse not to go deeper, not to open up, not to stay open to the process. But I let it be, and I let myself experience what I needed to experience. And the rest of the week was magical, and the interactions were deep, and they were powerful, and they were vulnerable. And that was the whole thing was meant to be a catalyst for me, because, and when you ask me about Cairo and like what the energy of the pyramids, I mean, it was very much of a whole masculine experience. And I needed to go through the situation with the cartouches, and I needed to go through the situation with talking to my coach on the side, and then sharing what was happening, and having that kind of like, cut off, and navigating through it on my own. And I will say that when we were at the airport, 2 hours delayed and they don't tell you anything. Oh, by the way, when you're in an Egyptian airport, you will go through at least 3 different securities and get patted down at least 2 or 3 different times. They pat you down. And you have to, you go through with things through x-rays like at least 2 or 3 different times. It's bizarre to me, like the level of militarization that president has created the airports to be on both sides, like Cairo and Luxor. It was just incredible the number of times you needed to have things checked. It's like, I got into this airport, like, what do you think I can do between coming through your security and then the next security? Like, what's going to happen? But, it is what it is. Pat me down a bunch of times. I don't know what you didn't catch the first time. But yeah. So, but we were sitting there for 2 hours. They don't tell you anything. We have no idea why the plane's delayed, why we're delayed. But I remember sitting on the floor, and I was like, I'm a freaking dragon, and I'm going to call in the dragons. And I did. I was like, all right, like, let's go. It is time for us to go. I kid you not, within 30 seconds. Okay, we can start boarding the plane.
Wow.
I mean, coincidence? I don't like to believe in that stuff. But yeah, it was just that there was a lot of preparation of me really believing in myself and believing in my power and being in my quiet. The quiet keeps coming up. Soft, light, but also very fierce, very powerful. That really set the stage for what came in Luxor, which is a whole other, I mean, that may need to be 2 more parts. I don't know, but yeah. Mm-hmm. And we've only gotten to 2.5 days.
It's okay. It's okay. You need the space to talk about this. Amazing.
Yeah.
You feel complete with your Cairo experience?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Stay tuned for our next episode in a couple weeks. It's going to come out on Thursday. If you like this episode, please rate and review and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram at the Limitless Human Podcast.
Thank you, everyone.